Well, there's Rocky. I don't know if you can see him or not, but if you can, there he is. And I'm going to tell the rest, or at least more, of the story of my great uncle Bill Yaros. Okay, I'm doing this mostly for my own family because, again, these are stories that I know, and I'm not sure who else knows them, if anybody. And a lot of the people who did know these stories are gone now. And I'm one of the few, and possibly the only one in some cases, who knows these stories. So I'm doing this for that reason. However, others may find it interesting too. I don't know, but I think most people find history kind of interesting. So if you're interested in World War II and in what the soldiers did and what they went through and everything, then you probably will find this kind of interesting. Anyway, I already told you about how my uncle, great uncle Bill, had married my great aunt Verna, who was my grandpa Fournier's sister, and how he'd come from England and all that. I already told you all that. Now, I'm going to get into the war now. These were stories that my Uncle Bill told my dad when my dad was a young man. And I know he told very few people these stories. I don't know who all he told. I don't know if he told anybody other than my dad, but I know he told my dad, and my dad relayed them to me, and now I'm going to relay them here. And actually, this is the 34th anniversary of my dad's passing. He passed away 34 years ago today, September 24th, 1988, when I was 20 years old. So, let's get started. My Uncle Bill Yaros, he joined the Army in 1942. He got his notice that he was to be deployed, and he had to report for active service on his wedding day, actually on his honeymoon, when him and Verna showed up at the hotel. He had to go, and he had to go off to war. He got sent off to Europe. He was all over Europe and Africa and he was all over the place. He had the medals that showed all the campaigns that he participated in. And in fact, I inherited his medals when he died. And I will tell you that story. But anyway, for now we're going to stay back in the 1940s and World War II. One story that my uncle told my dad, and this is kind of a neat story anyway, it shows how things can happen. My uncle, when the Allies were finally really winning the war, and they had the Germans on the run, and my uncle and the people, the men he was with, had been marching for days and days. They'd been just on foot, just marching, and they were pretty tired. And they came into this little town, and I'm not sure now what country they were in. I think they might have been in France, but I'm not, possibly Italy. I really don't know, but they were in some country in Europe anyway during the war. And the Germans were trying to stay ahead of them. The Germans were on the run, and they were basically in pursuit of the Germans. Well, they came to this one little place, and this little town, and it had Germans in it, and they drove the Germans out. They got into a firefight with them and everything, and they killed a bunch of Germans, and they drove a bunch of them out, and a bunch of them run away. And then, because of what happened, the Germans didn't have a chance, because normally they'd have destroyed the town, so there'd be nothing there for the Allied forces to use, or to give them any comfort or whatever. But the way it happened, the Germans didn't have the chance to destroy the town, so the town was pretty much intact, other than whatever damage was done by the firefight that they had, by the battle, to root the Germans out of there. So my uncle and the other guys that were with him, they decided they were going to spend a few days in the town and just rest, basically. They were just going to enjoy sleeping in beds and, and resting, basically. And maybe party it up a bit too, I suppose, because the town had a distillery, and the distillery was still intact, so you can just imagine. Anyway, in the distillery, there were these big vats of wine. They were like swimming pools, really, you know. There were big vats of wine and different things like that. And they had one guy there that who would actually swim in the vats of wine. You know, he'd actually swim in there. I guess it was more of a winery, really, than a distillery. But anyway, there was this one guy, he'd swim in the big vats of wine, and he'd be like, you know, spitting, taking it in his mouth and spitting it up in the air and everything, you know. Literally swimming in the wine. Well, my uncle and all his buddies,